It's called Underrated, Overrated. I mention a name or a thing. I ask you if you think it's underrated or overrated, but I'll try just a few. The pet rock, overrated or underrated?
Hi, I'm Andy,
And I'm Roger,
and welcome to The Middle
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics.
on our search to find the middle.
We're going to give you last week's news today.
That's a slogan we should put on a t-shirt.
Stop touching her!
I am tonight announcing my candidacy.
Taylor Swift.
Look, my biggest issue with marriage is that I think that it's a fundamentally flawed institution that is built on the oppression of women.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny.
Having truly rational conversations about controversial issues is risky these days.
G'day, Roger.
Andy, you know, the other day I've shared this with you before. I think that I am a beacon of light to every mosquito in a 1 kilometer zone around me. And no matter who I'm around, I always get bitten by mosquitoes compared to everyone else, right? So I've got this kind of sweet blood or this pheromone thing, they can smell me. And I was watching a video the other day of like a really macro zoomed in video of a mosquito trying to bite someone but being stopped by their body hair. And I'm like, wow, because I'm like a dolphin, right? I'm hairless, and maybe that's why it's like my people evolved in an area that didn't have to defend themselves against mosquitoes. I never really kind of put two and two together in the fact that like leg hair and arm hair makes it harder for mosquitoes to actually bite you. Did you know that?
Well, I mean, it must. I don't tend to get mosquitoes biting me. My son gets bitten all the time, though, so...
He's hairless, right?
Yeah.
There you go. No, but it did make me wonder, like, obviously it's more than that, right? Because you don't have hair everywhere anyway. Why wouldn't the dumbass mosquitoes just bite you on the neck or on the face or whatever? So it's not like a foolproof kind of thing. But then it got me wondering, like, have you ever wondered why, like, humans have pubic hair?
It must be a Japanese thing.
No, but seriously, like, why do we have this little triangle of pubic hair?
In case you need a hair transplant in your older age.
Well, I will be needing one soon. But I don't know what that will mentally do to you knowing that you have pubes like in your receding hairline.
Wouldn't it just be that like there was some default, like it's just that's a part of the body that hasn't...
You reckon it's like vestigial, like it was the whole area, but then it just shrank down to this like
or
island.
Either that or it actually does serve like a purpose in terms of sexually transmitted diseases or some other like nasties from the past. I don't know.
Pubic, because like pubic lice, right? It attracts more than it detracts.
Maybe there's a codependency there that we haven't explored.
I don't know, or maybe it was like back in the day. It was like Avatar. You know how the tails kind of connect together when they ride their like animals or when they have sex.
Yeah,
you're trying to find out, aren't you? Like, but don't you think this is like a relevant question? Like why do we have that patch of hair there? Like I thought like the curiosity, the human curiosity is so strong. Like why don't we have a definitive answer to that question?
Are you sure there isn't? I mean, well, you can't have a definitive answer to anything that involves like evolutionary sort of biology, but like, are you sure that there isn't a working hypothesis? That's
no, I mean like in the general kind of knowledge, like the trivia of it all, right? Like it seems like something that would have been asked by many a bro, you know.
So what you're saying is you think it should be like a commonly known pub quiz trivia answer?
Yeah, because there's no obvious thing, right? It's like a piece of trivia. Like, you know, you could say, okay, why do you have eyelashes? To keep shit out of your eyes, right? Falling into your eyes. That makes sense, even though it doesn't work. But the pubic area, right? And what do we lose? Like, what are we losing by shaving it off?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to give you a hypothesis. I don't have one. But do you have any thoughts? What if you had to guess? What would you say?
Well, yeah, I mean, like my view. I must admit, my view, if I was to push to kind of know, it's definitely not like for mosquitoes and parasites, because I think that you cover that part up with a little loincloth anyway. I think I would have thought if it was just on a man, I would have thought it would be offering some kind of protection for the genitals. But it's on women as well. So it's like, there goes that, right? It's not about protecting the Franken beans. And then I thought maybe it's more about like keeping the area warm.
So there's another, I've not really ever studied biology, so you just have to indulge me here for a little bit. But if I understand correctly, when it comes to like looking at these matters of like evolution and natural selection, not every trait that we have today relates to the inherent benefit of that particular thing. It could be that a common factor delivers some other benefit in a different way, but also produces this. So it could be that for whatever thing causes this, like, so, hairy people, for example, are generally, I don't know, is it that they've got more, like for men, they've got more testosterone? I don't know, like, and for women, I don't know. What's the thing that causes you to be particularly hairy down there? It's probably not testosterone.
I think it's, I think the clinical word is being Italian.
I'm not, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
No, look, I think I've actually just done a quick little search. I didn't want to pollute my browser history too much, but it's actually all of the above of what we're talking about, right? So it's talking about the main theories are things like disease prevention. It's about cushioning and protection to like a bumper for the genitals. It's also about this idea of like heat control as well. So I think that's like, we've covered a lot of those bases, but I guess like all good things, we don't know. And to your point, some things evolutionary wise, like, are just random.
Actually, you know what? This is a good one. I've got one we haven't talked about. I asked ChatGPT. So it's got protection, pheromone trapping, apparently.
Whoa. Yeah, I didn't think of that either.
Temperature regulation, but there's one
I can see that temperature regulation.
Well, one that's interesting that is pubic hair indicates sexual maturity, signaling reproductive readiness to potential mates.
Like a signaling thing. It's like if there's what do they always say, that horrible thing? If there's grass on the field or whatever, you're good to go, kind of thing.
All right, come on. All right, let's drag it out of the gutter here. All right, what are we doing today?
Well, I think we've been talking, episodes, some things, essentially trying to put our finger on whether certain elements are underrated or overrated, right? We've had it with, luxury goods, we've had it with cars and watches, and we thought we'd do an episode on our best underrated, overrated items or things, right? So this is just a random one for us to kind of have a little bit of a lighthearted conversation on certain things, and just kind of see whether we've got our finger on the buzzer.
So, how should we do this? Should we go one each and alternate? Or?
I came up with the pubes thing, so maybe you go first. Just to.
All right, I'm gonna hit off with what I think's an easy one. Hopefully, is French cuisine.
Ooh. All right, I would have said in my younger days, I would have said overrated, and as I've aged, I think that it's like the Roman Empire. Everything comes back to French cooking in modern Australian and other things. So I'm going to say nowadays is underrated.
Oh, I'd say for me, it's like easily overrated. It's just not that good. Like, it's just...
Okay, what are you thinking when you say French cuisine there? Like, spit out a few things.
Well, like French, when I say French cuisine, sorry, just to be clear, I don't mean as a consumer of French like food per se, but I just mean like the reverence that like is given to it. Like it's this like, all of the chefs, all of the best chefs like train, or like there's that whole thing like it's
classically trained.
Yeah, it's considered like the pinnacle or whatever. And I just think, no, fuck that. Give me like what they cook on the streets of Bangkok like any day of the week, over this stuff. Like it's style over substance. That's my view.
I think I definitely used to think like that, but I do think that when you peel apart most Western dishes, right, like and like fine dining and the evolution of modern Australian, it's all French. It's like it's all French techniques. It's all French, like this idea of like sauces, like saucier. Like I think it all leads back to that, and that's why I kind of think sometimes, All
right, well, let's put a sharper point on it then. French versus Italian.
Yeah, okay. I'm an Italian boy. I get it. But what does every cafe in Australia, in Sydney and Melbourne, have in their glass window? Where does it come from? French patisseries, everything. Come on.
That's only because it's like logistically easy because they don't have to do anything, like apart from take it out and pay the dude who delivers it every morning.
Because it sells, man. People love pastries. People,
Yeah,
it's
I don't
hard
think
to understate
I don't know
how much influence French cuisine has on like the Western world.
I don't know that's strictly true though. I think there's a logistics reason for that. I don't think that's comes down to anyway. But let's move on. I think you've got a return serve now.
I do, and I'll take us out of cuisine, and I'm going to drop into the equation Netflix.
I'm going to say overrated, and the reason I'm going to say overrated is because it was like the innovator, but I think most people have like by default a Netflix subscription, and then maybe they have like a second one, but I think it's the quality has declined, and I think it doesn't quite deserve the reverence that it once had.
I'm going to have to agree. I think that to me, it's a victim of its own success, because there used to be a point in time where it was small enough that you could have those water cooler conversations where it's like everyone watched House of Cards or everyone watched this and that or this Netflix thing. And it still has moments of that. Like I think without Netflix, you wouldn't have like a Squid Games, right? And I think partly to blame is the curation aspect. There are times legitimately where you cannot find anything to watch, and what's being served to you to watch is shit, right? And I think that's a real shame in today's culture, right? Like the feeling of knowing that there is incredible series and things to watch, but you can only find shit.
That actually, and that's I think that changed. I'm just trying to think when that did change. I think that changed around 2015 or. Like, I think there was this whole movement up to, like, say, the end of Breaking Bad, where there was just so many exceptional
golden
shows.
Era.
And then everything was good, and they were all aspiring to do that. And then at some point, the economics, like, they just all twigged that, like, hey, we've, like, already nailed, like, a few big hits, so we can, like, put in a bit of, like, squeeze in a bit more, like, what offal into the meat pie.
That's right.
Sort of thing.
At that point in time, right, I thought, okay, it's going to change. Everyone's just going to have this list of things that they have, right? A list of TV that they're going to watch, and it's all going to be amazing HBO quality drama, golden era, Mad Men, Breaking Bad, all this kind of stuff. But then Netflix just turned out to be another TV station, like another TV station that had shit in it, right? And I think like it was really disappointing because you fall into that. You're too lazy to change, so you just watch whatever schlop is served up to you next in the algorithm, right? And I it was just a realization. But to be fair to Netflix, they do take risks. They do invest, right? And they have invested a lot in stand-up comics as well, which I appreciate. So, and documentaries and stand-up comedy. Netflix has kind of, done more than just be a YouTube platform, say.
Yeah. And actually, just to that whole YouTube thing, like, because I've in some ways shifted more of my like viewing to YouTube over the last year or so.
Because of audits?
Especially audits, but like I think what it's made me as like a real world experiment, it's demonstrated to me the power of like, I don't know if we talk much about emergent order on the podcast. So if we have, then it's like this idea of like, if you just put out there, like if there's a critical mass of like monkeys, eventually they'll, like type out the works of Shakespeare. Like that feels like what YouTube is. It's just like, there's so much shit on YouTube that like they've worked out that scrap of like a slither of a percent that's actually like really good, or at least it's totally tailored to your preferences and tastes and what gets you going kind of thing, that they'll find the way to get that to you.
Yeah.
And I think Netflix doesn't have the scale to do that.
They've got to pay someone $20 million to
exactly,
make each thing, right? That's
exactly.
the problem.
And the beauty of YouTube is it's free content that people make for free.
But it's just a pile, isn't it? What's at the
it's
bottom?
an even
just
bigger
horrible
pile of shit, but it's big enough of a pile of shit that eventually in that pile of shit there's going to be that like, ornate tart that you were talking about before with French cooking.
Vivid. I like it. All right. Return fire.
All right. The Beatles.
I can't. I know what you want, but I can't give it to you. To be fair, obviously I have to pick one, and it's going to have to be overrated. And the reason I say that is that I feel like uneducated people, or people that aren't fans, revere them without listening to them. And I think when you get to that stage where you know it's cool to like source material like that, because they're so universally respected, then I think you start to move into that overrated category.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the Beatles obviously deserve how they're recognized, so it's not necessarily to slag them off, but I just think that, yeah, like it's a bit like Nirvana in some ways. Like once you get remembered for being great, then people don't really actually ever remember you. They just know that you're great, so then they buy the t-shirt kind of thing. And I think with with the Beatles, like as well, like I think we should kind of acknowledge too that like a lot of their music, like the actual innovation of their music isn't, it's actually in some ways derivative of a lot of what was happening in the United States with like, African American musicians and trends and things. So, and like that's not to say they didn't innovate and they didn't, change the game or whatever, but
yeah, they don't have the patent.
They kind of whitewashed, or they kind of, what would be the way to say it? They kind of brought
appropriated it.
Yeah, like they kind of brought that stuff to like a Western audience or an English audience, and then
don't get me started on the sitar. But yeah, look, the problem with the Beatles is that their impact and their legacy as like this kind of like the first boy band, even, right? Like even just like there's so many things that come from that original source. But what I find is that people know that it gives them kind of clout or credit to just like the Beatles and respect them. And it didn't always used to be like that. Actually, if you talk to people like our parents, the Beatles are more divisive. Like it's you can find people in our parents' generation who are just like, nah, fuck the Beatles. Like I didn't like them, right? But people after that, they're very much like universally adored.
And I must admit, like there's some of their music that I listen to and I just go, this is really cheesy. Like this. It
sounds like the Wiggles.
Yeah, like this doesn't land with me in any way. I mean, I really enjoyed watching Get Back, the documentary where you actually see them like writing or composing songs in real time or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, that's like, and then by the time you finish I don't know how many hours that whole thing was, but by the time you're done with it, you're kind of more familiar with some of the tracks on that album. You go, oh, I want to listen to that again. So like, that I think they did have that, but I think overrated is about right.
All right. I'm going to go with one that I think will be quite challenging, and that is brunch.
You know what?
Or like an Australian breakfast. Like,
okay,
cafe breakfast.
I'm going to go underrated, and the reason I say underrated is that I think breakfast is heavily overrated. So I think too many people, like this whole thing of like, oh, you've got to have a good breakfast to start the day, I think is the most overrated concept I've ever heard in my life, particularly when it's like some shitty cereal that is like probably neither nutritious nor worthy of putting into your stomach. And like just the whole concept of don't fucking get up at 5 a.m. and go for a jog and then have a nice breakfast with some fucking like yogurt and oats and some fruit. No, fuck that shit. Sleep in, have fucking brunch, skip lunch, do something in the afternoon and then have dinner. Like it's definitely underrated.
Interesting. I think I'm coming at this at a different angle to you, right? Like you in classic Andy style, you're coming through the conceptualized view of what brunch should be.
Okay, so you mean the eggs and like avocado on toast and all that stuff.
Exactly. I'm coming at it for what like brunch actually is, which is the same old overrated shit. It's like the easiest. It's like I find that like brunch is just this conspiracy that cafes have all got together and is like, oh, you know what? Our breakfast menu isn't selling very well. We're going to take the cheapest, easiest fucking food and sell it in a trendy way. We're going to cut avocado. We're going to peel an avocado and cut it and fan it out. We're going to boil some eggs and poach some eggs. We're going to give them this. We're going to bake them. We're going to charge them $30 for it with a coffee. And we're going to call it brunch. It's like, no, you're making a hot breakfast and you're marketing to lazy people and making them eat it at 11 o'clock. Like, this is just breakfast for lunch, and there's nothing brunchy about it. This is just breakfast.
All right. Well, let me re-answer then, based on the additional information. I'm still going to go underrated, just to be different. And the reason is because, like, I think still, it's not just about like, oh, you could like make this shit yourself. Like, this is Like, all you need is like the avocado, and like, oh, you can do your own toast. Like, you can do an egg. Like, no, it's like, it's more than that. It's the, like, particularly if it's a nice morning, it's like getting out while it's warm, not when it's like fucking freezing. It's going and sitting like maybe outside in a cafe, maybe having a coffee with, it's simple food. It's easy. And that's like, that's what makes it work, right? The kitchens in a cafe don't have to be these like, really expensive things. And like you said, like $30. Yeah, I'm sure there's some cafes that sell for $30, but maybe it's, I haven't been to as many cafes since the inflation, cost of living crisis. But, like, I think for me, I always remember it being like, around the $20 mark or whatever. And you won't get a good meal for like $20, like in a restaurant, right? So a cafe's got to be, it's got to be a bit more. So I still embrace the concept.
I just wanted it to be a bit more like what I imagine brunch. Like, I imagine it to be somewhere between breakfast and lunch in cuisine, not just timing, right? So that's what I want, right? Like, and there was a while where that was a bit more popular. Like, you go to places, maybe slightly more hipstery cafes, and they would try to blend some lunch items. Like, you'd have like, I don't know, chicken and waffles, or like they put hollandaise on like a lunch meal or something. Something where they're trying to give you something rather than slinging out like fucking eggs and bacon, right?
But I don't think the concept of brunch ever related to the food, though. Like, I think it was always the time.
Some of it, like.
But I think now if you go get breakfast in a cafe, like, the diversity of cafes is that they're all doing different shit anyway. But I think the concept of brunch was always like, have a good breakfast, but like, and it's more breakfast. Like, I agree with what you said around it's just breakfast. So why do you call it brunch? But I think it's called brunch because, it's certainly in Australia and like, maybe like cultures where you have breakfast like at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock. You don't have breakfast at 10 or 11 o'clock. Yeah. And I think it's born out of that.
Big cereal, man. But also, like, I think in other countries when you have brunch, it's like in a hand's reach to like mimosas or champagne or something. Like, it's kind of like more of an event than maybe what Australians are used to, which is just sourdough and some avocado fanned out. Anyway, let's
all right.
there.
Next one. This one's going to be very close to our hearts. Podcasts.
Okay. Yeah, it's obviously... I find this hard to answer because it's like saying whether books are overrated, right?
Well, because as a concept, like as a medium, like not any specific podcast, but as a way of listening and consuming information.
I think that they are underrated because I know so many people, and I include myself in this category, that would never listen to radio, right? But they're more than willing to engage in a long-form conversation on a topic that engages them through a podcast, right? And I don't really know why that is. Maybe it's just the cheesiness in the format, but I think that there is a thirst for like deep dive conversation on a topic, and that speaks to our idea that we just lack an oral tradition of storytelling in the West. And I think podcasts are invaluable for scratching that itch. And also, like we said before, men, I don't know why, but they just don't respond to reading, and they respond to podcasts, right? And so I think that is very underrated in that aspect, and I think it's a big part of why, engaging the male audience as well.
Well, I'm also going to say underrated for two reasons. One is, like, in some ways, like, podcasts remind me a little bit of like the early days of the internet, where it was just all this free stuff that you get for free and you have to pay for it. Like, it's like the old like Napster thing, like go and download music for free and you can you don't have to pay, like, or just, probably more like content news websites. Like, you never paid for anything on the internet before. And then they started to monetize or whatever. But like the fact that you get this like environment where it's, there's different business models, some monetize it or whatever, maybe throw in some ads or whatever. But like generally speaking, like the amount of like super high quality content that's free, you can't say it's overrated. It's bloody free. It's got a denominator of 0. And I just think the other thing is that the best thing about it, I think, is it gives like a platform to people who would never ever have made it on like traditional media. Like, so, traditional media was geared like you needed to have like some sort of
Yeah.
film. You need to go to the film or television radio school first, and then if you happen to like have a brain, maybe they put you on as the science reporter or something. Whereas it's the complete opposite other way around, right? The amount of like really intelligent, like absolute shit boring people, but that like would never pass that first filter of like, wow, yeah, they've got like this really great personality, but they're actually really interesting. It gets them part of an audience. And the second reason I think it's underrated is because like even though it's like still a lot of people listen to podcasts, there's nothing like unusual about you if you listen to podcasts, but like still a lot of people don't listen to podcasts or don't listen to that many podcasts or aren't familiar with some really good podcasts that you'd think they'd enjoy listening to, including The Middle. So if you have any friends, but you know what I mean? Like it's,
yeah,
untapped.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It is untapped. And that was my kind of comment around like underconsumption for men in terms of literature, right? Like I think it's really, really changed that, right? But also it's hard because there are so many bad podcasts out there, right? Like, and that's us saying that.
but hopefully there's the market's pretty good, like to be able to connect people up with the good ones. Like there's whether it's ratings or rankings or friend of a friend. One of the things we've grappled with The Middle is that it's very hard to kind of get a podcast out there to like by accident. Like people don't just sort of discover you by accident. Like
No.
it has to be that third party endorsement or someone recommending you or like, and that's just it's
Yeah,
people
even
don't
on a
just
billboard, right?
randomly-
Like,
yeah.
have you ever thought like if we paid for a billboard for The Middle on the M2, right? Well, it's just like coming over the bridge. Even that, I don't think like people go, oh, look at that billboard. I'll try to search it now on my podcast. Like,
Yeah.
or scan the QR code while I'm driving. Okay, my go. This should be a quick one. Electric toothbrush.
Oh, very overrated.
Hell yeah, overrated. Like every single dentist wants to put you on like an electric toothbrush, right? It's like they all work for Oral-B. And I feel like the experience is just so bad. Like I feel like I'm giving a blowjob to a robot dick, right? Like it's just so jarring, it's disgusting. It takes all the kind of like the tactile nature out of using a toothbrush, right? This idea that, like this simple, it's like sweeping, easy to learn, impossible to master. It's just, I just hate it. It makes it feel like a chore because all of a sudden you're thinking about like, oh, instead of brushing naturally in some kind of rhythm and, something, you're now thinking about polishing each individual tooth, right? And it's like, am I spending enough time? I've got to do all 360. I've got this time. It's like, no, this is not how you were meant to live, right? Like people are telling you how to live your life constantly through the day. You're having to follow the road rules. You're having to follow the law. When you get home and you look after your teeth, you want to do what the fuck you want. And I will not be held hostage to Oral-B.
But also, just the sludge of the like having a charger. Is it charged? And like, what have you ever had like an electric toothbrush that's run out of charge and then you've tried to use it?
Oh yeah. So that's up there with like the shaving, the battery running out mid shave, right?
It's just
but
like,
you know what's even worse than that though, Andy? It's like the secretion and the gunk of the toothpaste that inevitably solidifies around the base and the neck of your toothbrush. It's just like, God, like this is nothing but complication in my life, right? And I hate you. But everyone has one. Like everyone has an electric toothbrush and they have given up.
Why do you think, like maybe this is one to ask an actual dentist, but like, why do you think dentists are always recommending? Because they say, oh, it's good to have an electric toothbrush.
Because people are retards, right? Like it does work better. Like it's like asking whether you should use a hand mixer.
But okay, so
like
I want to take this a little bit forward though. This is like, it's not the innate quality of the. It's like a placebo effect almost, where it's not the innate quality of the electric toothbrush that results in better toothbrushing. It's the fact that you, like, when you have a manual toothbrush, a lot of people just do that vigorous, like, back and forth, and they're treating it like they're scrubbing fucking bird shit off of pavers or something, right? Whereas, like, you're supposed to gently massage and go around in circles. There's like a bit of a technique, and most people can't get that technique exactly to the wishes of the dentist, and then the dentist goes, well, actually, if we just constrain you in some other way, like we make you have this thing and then we give you these other
dumb it
rules
down.
about how but it's not actually the innate quality of the tooth, like the electric
Well,
toothbrush.
I think it's
still your aerosol.
I think it's both, right? Like I think it catches the net of people who are like do not know how to brush their teeth, right? And never understand that it's like an orbital motion, not just like a brushing, like a vertical motion, horizontal motion. But I do think there's also this idea of like the revolutions, and that does polish your teeth probably more efficiently or than you could do with your own wrist with a manual toothbrush. So I think that definitely is like a polishing aspect that probably cleans it a little bit better. And, there are other things that, my bloody one had like beeps it gives you like a mini beep every quadrant to show you like, have you done the 4 quadrants, and then a big beep to tell you it's over. Like, I don't want Oral B kind of telling me what to do in the bathroom.
All right, that was good. Sweden.
Sweden? What? A country?
Yeah.
I've never been to Sweden, and I don't know much about it other than the girl with the dragon tattoo. There's a famous saying, isn't it, that Sweden's a place where nothing bad ever happens, but nothing good ever happens either. Is that true?
Well, I've never been to Sweden either, so
why are you talking about Sweden?
Well,
I have like literally never heard.
It's a challenge.
I've never heard anyone talk about Sweden. And actually, the funny thing, is I used to work with a Swedish person, and they never talked about Sweden. This is how rudimentary and basic bitch my knowledge of Sweden is. The only thing I can think of, say it with me, IKEA. That's all I got, man.
Well,
that's all I got. And
okay.
even their meatballs, their cheap meatballs, are not enough to make me feel strongly about Sweden.
Well,
So
you've got to give an answer. You can't.
Well, it's gonna have to go overrated.
Well, I mean, you could have gone the other way. You could have said underrated because, like, obviously, I don't know anything about it, but
no.
People seem to be able to.
It's IKEA, man. Like, how many relationships have been terminated because of visits to IKEA? Either the visit to IKEA, and then if you somehow magically survive that together as a couple, putting the fucking thing together when you get back home, that will finish you off.
All right.
So there you go.
Okay, so I agree, overrated. My answer is coming from a different place to yours. I just feel like Sweden, for me, is the poster child of like Scandinavia in general, right? It's like the part of Europe which like has things sorted out, like where things work and it's like great and it's like this utopia.
COVID response.
And I just think like it's not. Like I just think that it's got this like Scandinavia and Sweden as the poster child. It's like this place which, yeah, it's fundamentally like approaches things differently to. It's like New Zealand almost. Like everyone says, "Oh, New Zealand, it's good." But actually, like people who live in New Zealand, like they fucking hate it. Like that's why they come to Australia. Like, and sorry to anyone from New Zealand listening. New Zealand, I'm sure, is a wonderful place, but like places like this, like these sort of obscure places, for precisely the reason you said, like no one's ever been there, right? Like generally, people don't go. Like it's not like the stop on your European tour, right? So people don't know much more than what they hear. They just hear, oh, yes, they've got really good public health system, or they've got really good prisons, or really good schools, like Finland. The education model. So I know this is a different country. My point more generally is that I just think these places get talked up as like amazing because like they knock off all the rough edges of society, but then equally for exactly some of the reasons you've said, they take off all of the exciting parts of society in the process. Yeah. So overrated. I agree.
All right, let's fire through some. I have one in the chamber that I've just thought of that is gonna be a good discussion for you because you can't worm out of it. It's going to be R.M. Williams.
R.M. Williams.
The boots, specifically.
Yeah. So I'm going to say overrated. Definitely overrated. So and sorry, when I say overrated, like I don't necessarily mean R.M. Williams per se, the brand. I mean just that idea of like a $500 pair of boots, Like I just think this idea that and then just not comfortable to begin with, and they take like almost like a year to like
break in,
and then it's so you just endure this period of discomfort, and then it's like, Oh man, if you really want to get like the supposed like 5 to 10 year like benefits, you've got to like do all this stuff to take care of them.
Are yours broken in now though?
I think so, but like they're a lot of so Aaron Williams was sold to me as like, oh, you'll never have like a more comfortable boot, and then I was like, or shoe or whatever. And then I was like, oh, it's been a month. When do they start getting comfortable?
It's like the whole Radiohead thing. You'll like it after you listen, after you push yourself to listen to it like 500 times.
So
But why'd you buy it though? Do you like
I just had like a lot of independent, like I was getting a lot of people from different sources saying they're great, right? So and maybe that's part of it. Like if I kind of got nudged past the point of like to buy pairs, and my expectations were at a point where I was satisfied to buy them, but then they didn't necessarily live up to those expectations. So that's why I probably say overrated. But that said, like I would definitely, like, as far as like a dress, like in terms of visually or whatever, like I think I can understand why that style of boot's popular, like because you can wear them with jeans, you can wear them to work, you can there's different. They're pretty versatile, right? In that sense, but. Yeah.
Well, I give RMs a hard time, and that's mainly because of the people who wear them, and I don't include you in that category, but a type of person that wears them under a suit, there's definitely a type. And I think that they've been, like a lot of good things in life, they've been taken from very good beginnings and bastardized, right? Like from its original purpose. Definitely overrated. I think that, again, these heritage items I really have a soft spot for, but they just never work out. This idea of you're gonna buy one pair of boots for your life, and you're gonna polish them and resole them every 5 years and all this kind of stuff, like, is just a romanticized vision that doesn't fit in with modern life. So I kind of think, I think it's one of those things, right? It's just that it's not suited to modern life, right? Maybe that would have worked on the farm or whatever, and you hear stories of like fathers handing down boots to generations and all this kind of stuff. Like somehow magically your son will have the same foot size as you. But anyway,
I just think with it as well, like just for me personally, I'm not really an RM Williams kind of guy, like you said, even yourself. Like put it this way, like I'm wearing shorts as many months of the year as possible, purely so that I can keep wearing my thongs. Because I don't want to wear thongs, and just for any international listener, I don't mean the thongs under my pants, like underwear. I mean flip flops, as they're sometimes called.
You're not like the Cisco thong.
Yeah, like the
sandals,
the Havaiana, however say it. That's that style of flip flop, which I like and I'm just freaking lazy, right? Like, and that's purely out of laziness. Like I just slip them on and off depending on what I'm doing, and it's like fits like indoor outdoor kind of lifestyle as well.
But I will kind of stick up for RMs to say that I love anything that is a modern version of Australian culture, and I think RMs falls under that category. It's uniquely blending bush and city, right, into like a trendy kind of way. So it's taking that forward, and I do like that part of it. Right?
Yeah. Okay, well, let me give you the next one. This is going to be a bit of a abstract one for you. Zoos.
Oh, yeah, I've got a real soft spot for zoos. So I think that they, even after everything, it's going to be underrated for me. And I have never been someone who's looked at a zoo and thought, oh, this is not right, having all these animals here, or like, I've never struggled with the ethics or the morality. In Sydney, we have the best zoo in the world, Taronga Zoo.
Do you really think that?
I really think that. I've been to many, many zoos. Not obviously, I haven't been to every country in the world, but I've been to like where many of what they think is the best.
I think Taronga sucks, to be honest. Like, I think the only thing going for it is the view. Like that's not even about animals.
Well, you're right. The view is definitely part of it. And for those who don't know, Taronga Zoo in Sydney is like on the heads, and it has like this beautiful view of the harbour. Like you can see the whole of Circular Quay and everything, and all the monuments and stuff like that. Right out the bridge and the Opera House. But I just think that when you go to Taronga, there is a real like natural beauty to the enclosures and the way that they've kind of nestled the animals in. Like, it's not like you never look at it and think, oh man, this is a cage. It's like it's all done so tastefully in the environment with like the natural trees and things like that, and how they built it up. You can tell it just like smells of this like respect for the the goal of education around these animals and sharing them to the public, right? Like, I think it's just very tasteful. It's very, you feel the passion of it all. I think the conservation element of it all.
I've not been to too many zoos in the world, so I don't have much to compare it to. In fact, I probably, if I really think about it, like if we exclude kind of animal parks that aren't quite zoos, so if we just keep it to actual proper zoos, I've probably only been to 2 zoos, including Taronga Zoo and Singapore Zoo. So I don't have much to compare it to. But the one thing I was going to say about Taronga Zoo, and the reason why I thought I think that's probably overrated, is because I feel like it's quite small actually as a zoo. So it doesn't have like that much space, like not necessarily for animals in each individual cage or whatever, but like, or whatever enclosure, but just more generally. And like there's things it doesn't have, like it doesn't have like pandas, for example. It doesn't have there's other things that it's limited in. So
Okay, yeah.
But I'm not talking about, this isn't about Toronto. I think I personally think zoos are overrated. Because I just think they're boring. Like what's what do you do? You go and see some animals,
right? Like the context is you're with your kids. I must admit, if you are a single person and you're constantly going to the zoos,
I've got the annual pass I have to make up to
you got the pass or whatever. I would have a few questions, like a few red flags would go off. But it's about the kids. It's about the kids. I know what you mean, because it can be boring. You have to become like David Attenborough, right? Like you have to kind of like tap into that like love of the natural sciences when you go there. And I find I can do that fairly easily, and more so as you get older. But yeah, I've been to, I think, like San Diego Zoo, Singapore Zoo, Chester Zoo, all these kind of, those are like, top 3 kind of zoos. And I think Taronga shits all over San Diego. Anyway, I want to do a food one very quickly. Something that I'm a bit conflicted about because I really got into this, especially around COVID, sourdough bread.
I'm going to go overrated. I just think that's classically overrated because it just so many people get obsessed with it, right?
Is it overrated because you're sick of it and it's overexposed, or is
yeah?
it
I
actually
mean, like if I'm in a cafe and I'm ordering, your favorite meal of the day, brunch, and it's avocado and eggs and bacon or something like.
Yeah, what are you getting?
If you give me the choice between having something on some like
Turkish,
Turkish or some milk bun or something, like no, I'm going for the freaking sourdough loaf, like sliced bread. Like that's what I want. Like that's the flavor profile that I'm looking for. And also, like the good thing about sourdough is you can buy good quality sourdough bread, have it at home on tap, right? It's good in that sense. The whole making your own sourdough bread, I think that that to me, like the idea of maintaining the sourdough starter,
the mother,
like that to me is it's not worth it to do. How much sourdough bread do you really need to be consuming that you're going to get into that? Yeah, so I'd say overrated.
Yeah, and it pains me to say because I did that, right? I've cultivated my own mother yeast, and you have to feed it every night, and you have to dispose of it as well, right? Like not only is it like you have to go to feed it every night, otherwise there are consequences. You also have to dispose of its like excess if you're not using it, right? And you usually only can bake once or twice a week, right? And there are all these complicated ways of like putting it to sleep by reducing the temperature and then reviving it and giving it a feed before you need it. Anyway, it's awful. But I actually have more problems with the actual bread itself. I think that it's changed the palate, and we're so used to having like quite tough bread now. And I think actually few cafes do it properly anymore now. because when you look behind the counter at the brunch place, it's all sliced sourdough. And the way it's done properly is fresh cut and it's thicker and it gives more room for the different textures like a steak where you have soft sponginess of the sourdough crumb and then a hard crust. Right now it's just put in it's tossed frisbee with zero love across the room into a contact grill press and it comes out fucking thin as a board and tough all over. And then they give you the nerve, they give you a butter knife to cut this thing. Have you ever experienced rage trying to like fucking cut through your sourdough bread and the motherfucker won't cut and things are slipping around, you're like having to press really hard, you got indents in your fingers are going white from like the pressure you're putting on this fucking knife and you just want a steak knife to cut through it. That is the norm now in Australian cafes. And I don't know where we went wrong.
The thing making the decision isn't how is it meant to be consumed in some kind of
experience,
what's the word, dedicated to sourdough kind of approach. Like the cafe is not revolving around sourdough. It's like people don't want like the shitty old sun-blessed white bread that maybe they could have gotten away with like 30 years ago. You need sourdough bread, and so they serve it up that way. And they've just replaced like the sun-blessed white bread, which I don't know if people know what I'm talking about when I say sun-blessed white bread, but just imagine like
the square loaf.
Your typical square white bread that you'd have on sandwiches when you go to school or whatever. They get packed for you. Like that. That's probably there's probably even cafes that still use that bread, but those ones don't tend to get the premium dollar, right? So I just think they've just substituted one for the other because the logistics work.
Yeah.
All right.
Last one.
Sydney house prices.
All right. Like, I think the issue with Sydney house prices is that if you can, we live here, so it's hard for us to have perspective. But if I was to try to force myself to have some perspective, I would say that if you are living in a place in Sydney where you can see the harbour or you can see the sand, then it's underrated or maybe normal rated, like justified almost. But if you have neither of those things and you're still paying Sydney prices, then it is very, very overrated. Right. And I think that accounts for the majority of people in Sydney. Right. I think people forget, and Sydneysiders definitely forget, how world class our lifestyle and our city is. And that's because a lot of us live a really long way away from water or the beach. So, yeah, that's my view.
Yeah, I think if you just said, if it was just house prices, not Sydney house prices, it was just house prices, I would have said overrated. Because, like, housing is too expensive, full stop. Housing should be cheaper than it is. There's no two ways about that. And I think the house price story is international. It's not just Sydney. It's Australia-wide and it's other countries. It's a thing globally that housing has become very unaffordable. And there's different factors in different places, but, and there's some common factors in places, but generally housing has become unaffordable and it remains unaffordable. In terms of Sydney house prices, I do think you need to kind of think of Sydney as a different city to Canberra, for example. Like it should be more expensive than Canberra. It should be more expensive than Adelaide. And you get a different experience in Sydney to what you get anywhere else in Australia. There are other places in Australia that will give you different things, and some people will prefer those things, and that's why they will move away from Sydney and move to those other locations, and that's good for them to do that if it represents better value for them. But, like, I think at the end of the day, Sydney is, Melbourne might like to kind of think that it's kind of in the ballpark of Sydney in terms of international city and all the rest of it, but, like, if you ask someone from another country, what does the Sydney skyline look like? Or rather, you show them a picture of the Sydney skyline, they'll know immediately that it's Sydney. If you show them a picture of the Melbourne skyline, they won't know where the fuck it is. They will not recognize it, and they don't give a shit about your fucking AFL either. While we're at, so yeah,
It's so true though. Actually, like I actually haven't thought about it that way. Like, what could you show in terms of the Melbourne silhouette that would be recognizable?
You can't. There isn't. Only that shitty arts centre or whatever.
Oh, Fed Square.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't want to show them that. They'll think it's a third world country. But I mean, no, but like, and also like the things that make Australia good, like, or unique or special, are a lot more embodied in Sydney than in other cities. Like, and yeah, like the beach, like the fact that you can be in the city and then you go for a swim after work, like that's quite unique as well. But Sydney's not the best place, you know, like it and just, you know, there like a lot of people from Sydney would, I'd love to be able to move to a regional area where I can get more space and have the same beach, but just less of the city hassle. But yeah, I just think when we, maybe to wrap this bit up, where we talk about Sydney house prices and we talk about how expensive they are. Yes, they are expensive, of course, but also size, they're bigger. They tend to be like, compared to say Hong Kong, right? You know, or some of these other places where they're not only expensive, but they're also small, right? Whereas in London as well, like we're European capitals, right? Sydney is like, you might get like a big house. Yeah, it might cost like 2 million, 3 million, but like it's a house. It's a proper house.
Yeah. I've got so many that I want to go through. I'm trying to limit myself, but I can't. So I'm just going to go with what's coming from the cloud. And that is like a true Apple fanboy. I'm going to say AirPod Pros, but what I really want to say is noise cancelling wireless headphones.
So we're talking headphones, or are we talking headphones / earphones, or is it specifically headphones?
And any kind of noise cancelling wireless earphones.
So I'm definitely going to say underrated. Of course, I've ribbed you before for referring to a generic product category as by the Apple brand name. So
I'm even worse now that I've listened to the Steve Jobs biography. So.
And also, I'll also flag that this is not a product category that Apple innovated. So I think you'd be forgiven for saying, like, calling like a tablet an iPad. I'd forgive that. But what I would say is, underrated because, and I'd say that links into some of the podcasts piece that we spoke about earlier around having access to audio in a really convenient way. And there's nothing novel about having headphones or having earphones or earplugs or whatever, but noise cancelling plus the wireless, like it made the user experience so much better that I think it's really enabled these other product categories like audiobooks and, you know, watching YouTube on a train, like all those, whatever those things, like just, yeah, it's empowered all those other things.
Yeah. I'm very torn on this. I was an early adopter of wireless headphone technology, very, very early adopter. And when noise cancelling came along, it was like revolutionary because, like you, I believe that noise cancelling headphones were the key to unlocking the spoken word, consuming the spoken word out and about, right? Because you just couldn't do that. And in fact, when you turn your noise cancelling off, if you have one of those headphones that toggle them on and off, it's almost impossible to listen to audiobooks or podcasts with the ambient noise. And I also think it's brought people, including myself, a form of calm in the world when operating in the world, right? Like it's almost like a security blanket that you can start to relax a bit because there's not so much ambient noise coming into your brain. However, I don't know about you, and maybe it's just me, but I have been noticing of late, or for a while really, like a real fatigue from wearing headphones. I don't know whether it's the end of the day or whatever. I feel like it's just this barrier. And actually, like, as much as I enjoy having the noise turned out, I do really, it gives me this sense of like impatience and rage in the same way that waiting for a lift does. This idea of like, I feel frustrated, like almost like what a woman would kind of describe when she comes home from a day out and needs to take her bra off. I feel that, don't you feel sometimes the same way about like headphones and earplugs. Like I feel like you
Do
just
you
have this
mean
fatigue of
physically?
them in.
Do you mean the physical sensation, or do you
No,
mean
it's mental.
the mental?
It's both, but
Okay.
it's meant like my earplugs don't hurt my ears, but there's just like this mental thing, and there's I also feel the same rage about when like I need to interact with people. So I need to like order a coffee or do something. And this is like a totally a first world problem, right? I'm talking about taking off my noise cancelling headphones to order a coffee. But things like that where you just like, it's this kind of barrier between you and the world. And in that way, it's not seamless. And I just feel sometimes I feel very encumbered by it. And I feel that maybe it's part of the problem. Like we've found even further ways to detach ourselves from our community.
All right, so I'll pick up on two aspects of that. So I think to the first point around the barriers and like, oh, you want to order a coffee or whatever. I think now I used to be like my first foray into this kind of style of listening was definitely the cans, right, the headphones, and I got those. In fact, I still use the same pair that I bought back then. And they're noise cancelling, wireless, all that sort of stuff, really good and all that. And I was a big sort of fan or defender of those over every other approach or technology. And then I think you, as I think you've said, you're an early adopter of the earbuds, right? So I was a little bit late to that party, but once I got, was it probably a year ago or maybe just over a year ago, I got a pair of earbuds. Noise cancelling, the Bose ones, and I've got to say, I've pretty much shifted 100% to those, and I think part of the reason, one is like that comfort thing. Like I just find they're more
minimalistic.
Like, you don't, and the sound's good. Like it's not as good as headphones, but it's like pretty damn good as it is. Plus, you've got the other thing is I find they're better. Like that whole like the noise cancelling, you turn the noise cancelling off, and it's much more like you're in the real world. Like it doesn't feel like you have to do this physical take them off. Like you just press a button and suddenly you're like back on planet Earth. So I find that a thing. But I do think more generally, like, this idea of excluding yourself, like it's this, and I think that's a double-edged sword, right? Because what makes them brilliant is you can exclude yourself from everything around you, and you can be on the noisy train and just zone out because you feel like you're in your own world even though you're not. Or even like when you've got like lots of shit going on at home, everyone's like, you've got kids yelling and screaming and you've got all this stuff, just chaos, and you just need like, I just want to cook something and have these on so I can zone out for a bit. Like you create that space for yourself. And it does create that space for yourself. But then equally, like the other side of that is, well, just you can't create too much space for yourself, otherwise you're excluding everyone else, sort of thing. So it's like, you have to manage that. You have to deal with that. But I guess
you can't go back. That's the one thing that's for sure, right?
Oh yeah, hell yeah. No. Well, what are you going to do? Go to the old 3.5 mil plug into the Walkman kind of thing?
Have you seen this thing about raw dogging on flights? It's this viral thing at the moment where like men, and I don't know, it's just probably a comedy thing. I don't know how real it is, but there's this thing about men raw dogging on flights and posting it and kind of like as a challenge to each other. And raw dogging is going onto a flight, like a sizable flight, and not taking any entertainment, just looking at the status tracking of your flight and how long you can do it. And it's like this mental game thing around like making you stronger. And they have like people of like, I went on like a 7-hour flight and I raw dogged it and I didn't have headphones on. I didn't watch any movies. I literally just stared at like the status thing of the plane moving across the screen. And there's people that have done it for like long haul and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't do that. But I do think the other thing that's the other effect of these like headphones or whatever is, I think it's contributed to like attention span.
Yeah,
like because like the thing is now I'm like I can't do anything. Like it's even when I'm driving, like I can't not have like something going on. Like you've got to have something.
Well, you feel like you're wasting time, right?
Yeah, that's part of it too. Actually, the one thing, like, as well, you said you get mentally drained or whatever. Sometimes I get mentally drained, like with, say, you're listening to an audiobook or a podcast, like, I can't. Like, I've just had too much, like, words spoken at me for the however long. But then that's, like, the perfect time to flip into music, right?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I've just been feeling relief sometimes when I take them out. And sometimes it's something about it. I think it's something that's going on at a biological level with the noise cancelling, the active noise cancelling, that I think it's not the same as just not listening to things. Like I feel like it's something going on with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to this in your wireless headphones and AirPods.
Yeah, and I feel sorry for you if you're trying to listen to it in the car with all that road noise.
Or even worse, a pair of headphones without noise cancelling.
Wired ones that when you pull your head up too quickly, it rips them out of your ears. Remember that feeling?
And then there's this guy, and he's just got this like old school, like one of these like radios, like this thing that he pops on, and it's got like the antenna that pops out.